We know technology and AI is changing the real estate investing landscape, but as an investor or property owner, where should you start? Well, that is exactly the question I posed to David Blumenfield on today's conversation for Multifamily Insights. David talks about how he's leveraging technology and consulting other investors and operators across the country in different asset classes to leverage the new technology and AI to drive efficiencies and ultimately profits when it comes to real estate investing. If you're trying to figure out where to start and how to incorporate technology into your business, you don't want to miss today's conversation right here on Multifamily Insights. When you think you found a great deal, asking the right questions could be the difference in finding a stud or a dud. Listen, we've put together a new guide to help you out. It's called 7 Questions You Must Ask Before Investing in Apartments. Now, in this guide, you're going to learn how to uncover red flags, quickly identify underwriting risk, vet sponsors and team members, and confirm key assumptions. Now, this is a guide that's going to help you be a better investor, whether you're an active investor or you're a passive investor looking to partner with other operators. Asking better questions is the key to identifying great opportunities. So download this free guide. Go to our website, casmoncapital.com/7 questions. That's the number 7 questions. And you can access this free guide today. To make it easy on you, though, we've put a link in our show notes. So you go to the show notes, you can click that link and access the guide right now. This guide's going to help you make better investment choices, asking the right questions to build your portfolio. So be sure to download it today. David is currently the co-founder of Next Rivet, an advisory focused on helping traditional real estate businesses leverage digital technologies. Before co-founding Next Rivet, David led business development at Westfield Labs, the shopping center industry's first global PropTech division focused on bringing new digital technologies into Westfield's mall and airport environments in the US, UK, and Australia. Let's welcome to the show, David Blumenfield.
Hey, John, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, David, it's great to have you on the show. I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, well, I think you did a pretty great job. As you said, we are a PropTech consultancy really focused on how do you bring and leverage digital technologies into the physical space. We work primarily across 3 asset classes, retail real estate or shopping centers, office, and of course, multifamily residential, which I know we'll talk more about today. And, the ethos of our firm is really about how do you go about figuring out what your business challenges are and bringing technology into play that solves real business needs, not just tech for tech's sake. It's really about what are the ways in which you can execute and get the most bang for your buck. I think you see a lot of the larger consulting firms will come in and a lot of times, deliver to you a beautiful 200-page PowerPoint, but then that's dropped on your desk, and then you still have the same issues you had before, which is how do I then go implement this? How do I get this done? We don't necessarily have the expertise in-house, and most real estate companies don't. And so it's really about, in so many words, moving things from the PowerPoint slide and putting them into action. And that's really what we specialize in. So it's figuring out what you need, whether it's helping write the kind of building out your technology roadmap, writing the business requirements, then getting into a vendor selection process. So we're tech agnostic or vendor agnostic. So we're not tied to any one technology. So if you unlike, again, other consulting firms, which may tie you into certain tech, and then you're stuck with them for the next 3, 4, 5 years because they're the only ones who know how to service that tech. We're really about bringing the right solutions in. And then once we get those vendors kind of under contract, we can actually help manage them all the way through launch so that they're not kind of snowballing you with their jargon or pushing out timelines or things like that. So it's really, again, hands-on, practical help and support to bring these solutions to light.
David, I appreciate you sharing that, right? You talked about really coming into the space, helping investors, property owners of commercial real estate navigate the tech landscape, right? Understanding which technologies they need, helping them build out a roadmap, but really helping them with the implementation. It's one thing to hire a consultant and get a 200-page deck dropped on your desktop, and now you got to go figure out what the heck to do with this thing. You actually help with the implementation process there as well, and not necessarily tied to one technology firm, but really being able to take a look at the holistic approach. What do we need? What are our priorities? And who are going to be the best partners to help us execute that? Let's back up just a little bit because, I think when we hear PropTech, that's really morphed and changed a lot over the last few years. I know when I first started hearing that term, we were talking about like smart locks, and being able to do things
Yeah.
that are probably more commonplace today. With the evolution of AI and just technology as a whole, I'm sure the prop tech landscape has continued to explode. Real estate tends to be a much slower adapter to new technology.
No idea what
So
you're talking about.
yeah, right. I mean, when I started investing, we were still doing paper and pen, to leases, right? Like I had to
Yeah.
meet someone at a Starbucks to sign leases. So, and I haven't been investing that crazy long, but 10, 12 years ago, that's what we were doing. Like this notion of, virtual leases and using e-docs and all of that's
Yeah.
really come over the last 10 years. But with that said, I'm sure you work with older investors and more experienced investors who kind of have a tried and true way of doing things. But you also have some younger and newer investors who are maybe more prone to adopting new technologies. As you look at the overall landscape, when people come to you, what are some of the most common challenges they're looking to solve?
Great points and great question. I think, as you said, prop tech, and I hate it, and I find myself falling into it. It's property technology or property tech. It's not. I think people we get stuck at the first word, and then nobody's going to understand what the heck we're talking about from there on. It is a broad term, right? I think in the beginning it was just as you said. There were things like smart locks and ooh, can I put something on an app? And you made the point about just even digital signatures like DocuSign. A quick anecdote: when I was at Westfield and we were in the Labs group, we were doing new contracts, obviously different contracts than Westfield, the shopping center company, had ever done before. And then, heaven forbid, that I introduce electronic signatures into the company, and it literally took 5 years of debate with our general counsel to find, and he was a brilliant guy, but it took 5 years to finally get him to the point where it was like, okay, this will legally hold up in court if I have a digital signature versus a physical. So you talk about the length of time and maybe the slow moving aspect of the industry, and that's still true today. I think there's many different areas, and I'll just cover a couple. I think with in terms of property tech, there are things you mentioned leases. So a couple of things that we've done with clients is actually putting new, digital leasing platforms. We had clients using Excel and, basic spreadsheets to be, tracking all their leads and tracking revenue and understanding when renewals were happening. And then if the leasing agent walked out the door, they weren't all those files weren't even necessarily centrally stored in the cloud or a server somewhere. They were just existing on the laptop. So helping put in some of these centralized systems, whether it's a leasing platform, whether there's then you get into things like building management platforms. I think one of the things that, the AI has done is accelerate some of the smarts of the building. So just as you have maybe a Google Nest in your house, think of kind of the Google Nest for your building, right? Like, how do I start to optimize the energy efficiency, for example, occupancy, all these different things where now there's the building is essentially, not to scare people, but it's alive in a way. It has all these sensors that you can now kind of intake the data from those sensors and then make some either manual or automated decisions on how you want to run that building. And I think, there are real kind of ROI and cost savings when you start to do some of those things. And then there's also, then you think about the tenant experience. We talked about smart locks, but obviously, we've worked on projects where, whether they're mixed use properties or let's say a retail, office, and residential, like how to use digital as kind of that connecting thread line, so to speak, between the three, so that if I'm a resident in the apartment, maybe I get special access to some of the retail things that are on the property. Maybe I can go rent a conference room if I need to in one of the office buildings, and doing that all from kind of a digital interface, whether that's an app or a website, but having all those services connected in. So it is a broad category for sure, and it's really more about like I said at the beginning, like what are the use cases that you're trying to solve for? Like I want a better tenant experience, or I want a better parking experience, or I want to make my building more energy efficient. So I think you have to kind of drill down into some of those areas, because otherwise I think you'd kind of get into analysis paralysis and never do anything.
Yeah, you hit on a few things, right? So one is just the overall process, right? That could be from the tenant experience, leasing documents, understanding when renewals are coming up and having some sort of, we would call it a CRM, but some sort of management system in place, a
Yeah.
centralized location to track, okay, hey, we've got these leases or portal, whatever it is, right? But you've got something set up where you can track where your leases are, your documents, key dates you need to remember. Then you talked about the building management, going beyond just the Nest thermometer in your home, but really having something that tracks the health of the business, the building. Are there any leaks? Are there any energy inefficiencies? Things like that. So you can almost do some preventative maintenance and stay on top of things that may become bigger issues down the road. And then you start talking about, really how do you elevate the experience for those key stakeholders, whether it be, parking gaps or being able to lease, rooms or other amenities that a property may offer, but doing that through some sort of digital interface there. You work across different asset classes, right? You talked about office and industrial and, multifamily. So as you're talking to the different asset class owners, can you just maybe give us a little context of maybe where there's some similarities and where there's some differences as far as what some of those digital needs are?
Yes, for sure. And I think certainly from a shopping center perspective, at least to date, there's been a big focus, maybe probably more so on, what am I doing for the shopper? How do I keep the shopping center relevant in the face of all this online commerce, where people are coming in and being able to take advantage of things that they wouldn't be able to in just the digital world, which I realize is kind of maybe confusing because it's, you need unique physical experiences combined with kind of a digital layer to interact with those things, right? So, whether it's augmented reality tours or other things where you get access, even just, hey, I'm walking around the mall, I get access to real time inventory of the shirts that I'm looking for in a particular store without necessarily having to walk into that store. So there's a lot of, and I mentioned the parking experience, which is, how do I create a frictionless parking experience? One project we've done is putting in license plate recognition tied to your credit card. So you think about going to the mall. A lot of times, if depending on which mall it is, and the parking may suck, it may not be a great experience. And so you're basically, if it's not a great experience, your first and last touch point with that property is not a good one. But if you can create a frictionless experience where I drive up, it recognizes my license plate, the boom gate opens, I drive in, park, I drive out, the boom gate opens, and it automatically charges my credit card without me ever having to pull a ticket. Like those are the kind of frictionless experiences that I think people are really interested in. Then you take something like office. It's going to be more leasing based. It's going to be more building management, and some of the you're not. I mean, it does depend, but it's harder when an office environment, right, where you have maybe different types of tenants. A lot of times, each one of those tenants is going to want to make their own decisions on what they give their employees. If the law office versus the tech company versus the insurance agent. I'm just throwing it out there, but so a lot of times those are kind of micro decisions that each company that is leasing space is going to want to make. So you almost have to kind of make the building a little more kind of future proof and open to different things without maybe actually launching specific solutions. So that then each company can kind of come in and build their own solution on top of that infrastructure. And then in the multifamily residential, it is kind of the combination of both, right? You need the leasing, you need the back end stuff, you need the building operations, and then you need some of the tenant engagement things that make the property more interesting to the tenant. Like, again, like if I'm a tenant, wow, there's some retail on the property. Maybe I get special deals and offers. Maybe there's a special wine event that a retailer is putting on, or maybe I need special access to an office every once in a while. So I think there's some creative things you can do, and without people having to run around physically, it gives putting all that in one place, as we talked about, is pretty interesting. So it does depend on the different asset classes, in terms of kind of where people are putting their focus.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, right? You talked about in the retail shopping center space, it's definitely more about that shopper experience, using some augmented reality, inventory checks, things like that, which enhance that experience for that shopper. You also talked about the parking lot experience, right? And being able to just recognize the license plate and automatically have that charge your card. It reminds me, I was just traveling over the spring break, and I think we had a layover in the DC airport, if I'm not mistaken. And in one of the little shops in there, little kind of convenience shops, you swipe your credit card to go in, and you just grab whatever you want and walk out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had never seen that before because I don't fly to DC very often. And I was like, so wait, I just walk out? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, how do you know what I paid for? Because I went in with a water bottle. I'm like, I want to make sure you don't try to charge me for something I actually brought in. And the lady looked up and she just like did this, like the camera's in the sky. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Of course I'm in DC. Big Brother's watching everything. But it's kind of frightening for, sometimes like just looking at how far technology has come where I can swipe my card once, go in, grab whatever I want, just walk, bypass the cashier completely, just walk right out. And then my card is going to kind of magically get charged. Again, we talked about the slow adaption for some owners and some investors when it comes to real estate and some of these technology. Can you help maybe give us a benchmark of like, where do most people need to be today? Like for that person who's like, I've done it like this for the last 30 years. We're going to keep doing it this way. At what point are you really jeopardizing the business, the property, the investment by not adopting some of the important technologies today?
Great question. I think, yeah, and to your point about speed, and my family always gives me shit about this because I say this a lot, but I think in the in the tech world, everybody wants to be the first to be second, right? They want to be on the cutting edge, but they want to know at least one other person has done it so they can go tell their boss that there's like proof that it works.
Yeah.
In the real estate space, it's like everybody wants to be the first to be 15th or 17th, right? It's a follower industry. It's a conservative industry based on, predictable returns over time, right? And so a lot of times technology flies in the face of that, either because you can't prove out an immediate return on it, or it's just an unknown. And I think there is a mindset shift that has to happen. Like, hey, we're going to try some things here that may or may not pan out. And the great thing about technology versus physical is that you can fail fast, and it's not necessarily going to crush the business. You put a wall in the wrong place, and you have to rebuild the wall or the foundations of a building. It's a much more expensive proposition. So you have the opportunity to test and learn. Maybe not, nobody wants to make mistakes, but you have the opportunity to try some things that you don't necessarily have in the physical world. I think some of the table stakes stuff for these guys doesn't necessarily have to be, kind of fancy consumer experiences. Although I do think people are if you look at the more modern buildings, I would say that kind of one of the shining examples of a mixed use property would be something like Hudson Yards in New York, where they are putting a lot of the amenities kind of in the palm of your hand, being able, whether it's dry cleaning or the gym or other things that I have kind of with me that I can take quick action on. It's really things like we talked about earlier, like, okay, all your leases digitized? Do you have a system in place to manage the renewals? One place where AI is really coming into play with a lot of that stuff is, can I use AI for lease abstraction, right? Meaning I'm doing a lot of leases for a lot of people. Maybe I need a different kind of lease, but instead of having to go back to my law firm for a brand new contract or sift through a ton of contracts to say, I know we did this clause like 10 clients ago, like the ability to essentially have a database of clauses, for lack of a better term, but AI can kind of pull that out for you. So I think a lot of the operational pieces are really starting to become table stakes. And I also mentioned kind of the building management systems. While you don't necessarily need to have them in place, there are real like operational efficiencies and ROIs that are coming out of that. Imagine, simple things, right? Okay, I realize I can not have my heating on, my HVAC on for 2 hours a day. I can have it on for 2 hours a day shorter than I thought I could before. That's real money. That's real money that's being saved there. And a lot of those companies can help prove that out. I think the other interesting kind of one that's interesting from an investment perspective is site selection. So there's a lot of tools right now that are being kind of, there's a lot of site selection software out there that you can look at, like put in your parameters. I want these type of demographics and other things, and maybe there are these properties that are available for sale or where I should go. Because AI helps to crunch a lot more data and synthesize a lot more data than you've been able to do before, you have a lot more inputs and therefore better models to be able to then invest against, because you have more predictable returns on maybe some of the properties that you're looking to invest in, or understand better kind of what you're walking into in the first place. And I think, I always try to make this point to everybody. We're obviously in the age of AI, and everybody is like, oh, it's got to be all AI. In my mind, AI is really just an ingredient brand, right? It's the ingredient that helps make the technology you're already using better. And yes, there are some new, really AI-driven tools like a ChatGPT or some of the conversational AI stuff. But really, it's since we're all older, I guess, in the real estate world. If anybody remembers the Intel commercials back in the day, it was like Intel Inside, right? You'd see a laptop commercial at the end, that little Intel blue logo would fly up and say it's Intel Inside. It's now just been replaced by its AI inside. Like there's AI inside everything. And so it's not a standalone robot for the most part. It's really just an ingredient technology that is accelerating things, and accelerating the existing technology we're using, and it's certainly pushing the boundaries of some of the new tech that's being developed.
I appreciate that response, right? I think it gives us some context of what we should be paying attention to. And you started getting on really looking at the operations of things. Where are you spending a lot of time? Where are the documents? Whether it's leases, whether it's agreements, whether it's lease expirations. You talked about lease abstractions, but really recognizing that you probably have already done a lot of work and you have that information available. But it's hard for us as humans to go and weave through, 50 contracts to figure out which contract had that clause. But if you can leverage technology, leverage AI, it can do that for you in an instant. And that's going to save you a lot of time. So again, the more you can digitize some of these things, the more you can streamline some of these approaches, it's going to save you time. And to your other point, when you can get into the facilities management, whether that's managing the heating and cooling, the temperatures you set it at, or other factors like that, now you're talking about cost reduction, right? And lowering those expenses. And that obviously goes towards the bottom line, driving up the NOI. So certainly some different things that we can do to leverage technology to help drive more profitable businesses and drive just more efficiency in general. When
Yeah.
we talk about that, one thing for a lot of people is, we hear AI, we've been having a lot more AI type conversations, but I think a lot of people are still in this space where AI is really chat GPT, and maybe they don't fully understand, all the things that AI can do, or some of the different apps or tools that they can leverage to bring in some of that knowledge. I know that you are kind of tool or vendor agnostic when it comes to finding the solutions with the clients you work with. But for those folks who are maybe starting out and they're trying to figure out how to incorporate more AI into their business, are there some tools that you would recommend, or some spaces, or maybe just give us a starting point? Where should they begin if they want to start to leverage technology and AI to help them modernize their business?
Yeah, I think, and it goes back to my previous comment, where I try to get people out of thinking about, I need to get AI in my business. I think it's more like, what are the business challenges you're trying to solve for? Like, what are the things that are inefficient? And granted, it also helps to look at different things too, because it's going to spur ideas. But I think, and that's, it's where firms like us or somebody else can be helpful in just like helping to understand the landscape and what's even out there, because I think there is that the information gap, as you mentioned, in terms of like, I don't know what I don't know, right? Like there's so much out there. But I think starting to get a handle on and educating yourself on, okay, as a property, like, what are the systems we talked about from a leasing perspective? What are the systems from a building operations perspective? What are and talk to your peers. I mean, I think that's there's people get information in different ways. We have one of our strategic partners, Coresight Research, is they're a research group, and they go deep into kind of industry stuff and with market reports and all these things. I am not a guy who wants to sit in front of the computer for 3 or 4 hours a day, looking up stuff and reading about it. I would much rather go talk to somebody, talk to the companies who are doing these things, learning about it through conversation. So however you take in information, I think it's really educating yourself, because it is, sure, there are companies like us around, and we can do a lot of that process for you. But I think first and foremost, like, you need to kind of take the time to not say, oh, I'm just too old. Like, I can't understand this stuff, because that's honestly, that's BS too. And I'll give you an example. The Westfield CEO, when we first got there, was not very tech savvy. To the point where, our head of digital was helping him with some computer stuff at one time. But basic computer stuff. but he made it his kind of mission as a CEO to say, I need to get up to speed on this stuff. And literally 5 years later, he's on stage at big, national trade shows, giving keynotes about the intersection of physical and digital technology and talking about tech as if he knew it and talking about it intuitively, not to see that somebody wrote a speech for him. And so it is possible to kind of to teach us old dogs new tricks. Like you just have to be willing to put in the time and then lean on external parties or talk to the vendors and just do your homework in order to, whatever made you successful as a business leader. And to date, you just have to take those skills and really apply it to something maybe you just don't know a lot about yet.
No, I love that, Dave. And I appreciate the example too with the Westfield CEO, because to your point, I think we all have seen how much technology has changed over the last few years, and we're all going to be forced to adapt to it one way or the other. And it's just a matter of how quickly you can adapt to it and incorporate technology as part of your team, as opposed to, just trying to fight it. So the more you can do that, I think the better off you're going to be. Our listeners range from, that person who's got just one single family house that they're renting right now and self-managing, to folks who manage thousands of units in their portfolio. Can you talk to us about the kind of clients you work with and who's an ideal fit? And for the folks who are not an ideal fit, maybe you can give us a couple of tools or resources that they can utilize to incorporate more technology into their business.
Yeah, absolutely. Our wheelhouse client base, as I mentioned at the top, really whether it's a shopping center or an office, but from a residential standpoint, certainly a multifamily residential building unit, and usually more than just one building. Somebody who has a few buildings where they're managing multiple properties and start to need some of the tools that help with those economies of scale. We can certainly do the one-off building, but likely there's some things that don't make that cost efficient for the property owner. In terms of resources, there's I think again, I would there are industry associations. You can certainly go talk to folks. As I mentioned, talking to your peers, and then really going after like look at just if you just did a simple Google search like on property management, building management, BMS systems, like building management software. Encourage you to read their websites, give them a call. Like I know, as soon as you give a vendor a call, now they're going to be on you, but maybe that's the cost of the information share, right? Which is have a conversation, have them. I mean, they have to educate clients all the time on what their system does. And so in a lot of ways, talking to those guys, if you talk to a good vendor and a good salesperson, they're going to help break it down for you. And again, certainly they're going to try to sell you their solution, but you can be transparent that you're early in the market and you're just trying to understand the space better. So I think those are some of the kind of, if you want to hack this, so to speak, it's like talking to peers, talking to a couple of vendors, doing some easy searches. And I think you can at least start to get up to speed on the types of systems and types of things. So you kind of understand the landscape a little bit. And then when you're, ready to really engage, we'd love to help out if we can, but that may or may not make sense depending on the company.
And David, I love what you said too, right? You talked about understand what you're solving for. Like, don't just try to incorporate technology just to incorporate technology, but take a look at maybe where you're spending a little extra time or processes that you're repeating over and over. You have to keep hiring attorneys or other professionals, and then figure out where technology can help make that a better experience, more streamlined, better for the resident, better for you, more profitable. That's probably a great place to start. And then from there,
Yes.
as you mentioned, you could look at, different vendor partners, talking to peers. What are you doing to solve for this? Or how are you driving efficiency in that space? That's going to give you a platform or kind of a progress to go out there and drive more efficiency in your operations. I appreciate you sharing that.
And you brought up a point that I want to make. I think one of the biggest mistakes that companies make when they're like, okay, we come in, like we've chosen a vendor, we're doing this thing, we've chosen a vendor, but now we're kind of in this, like it's not getting launched right, or we launched it and it's not working. And the biggest thing, just like you lay out architectural plans before you ever start, pouring concrete, and when you're building a physical building, like you have to really write a tight business requirements. Business requirements, like what are you trying to do from a business perspective? And then layer that into technical requirements. Like, what do you need the platform to do? I need it to, be able to pull up leases. I need it to be able to abstract clauses. I need to be able to see what our margin is on certain deals if we do certain X, Y, and Z. Like, you need to specify that thing so that you can then give just like you would your general contract for your house. Like, I need to give you my list of requirements. And if they're not laid out clearly, a lot of times it may be the right system configured wrong, or maybe it's the wrong system overall because you didn't lay out really what the requirements are. And so that's where we see that's a big pitfall that I think if you don't do the work up front, you're kind of setting yourself up for a less than ideal implementation.
David, I think that's a great breakdown. For folks who want to learn more, please email David. His email is david@nextrivet.com. We'll put a link to that in our show notes. Right now, we're going to transition to our round of insights. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmoncapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmoncapital.com and click on the Mastermind button today. David, give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Gosh, early in my, I was old enough to be in the .com boom here in San Francisco. And as I was kind of going after my second job, when all the new search engines were big, there was, Yahoo and Excite and all these others. And I was way down the path interviewing at Excite. In fact, they told me that I was going to be offered the job. They just needed to do some things over the weekend. And then for whatever reason, I don't know if I did something or something happened, the job spec changed. I didn't get that gig, which then resulted 3 months later in going to work for CNET, which was the Computer Technology Network, or CNET.com or News.com. It was one of I would say the second tier of some of the big companies coming out of the .com boom. But that really got me into technology, right? And Excite, I would have been a tech company working on a search engine, whereas I was now working at a site dedicated completely to computer and technology information. And that really kind of paved the way for the rest of my career, kind of being in the tech space in different forms and took certainly different shapes and forms and sizes. But, I've stayed in that industry ever since. So failure to get the first job, but open up another door for the CNET job.
All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
I look at, in some of these things may be kind of specific to my industry. I mentioned CoreSite Research. CoreSite's a partner of ours, but they became a partner because I looked at their content a lot and was interested in kind of looking at more. And they're more on the retail real estate side of things. The Commercial Observer is another publication that I read. And then if you want to get into some of the PropTech stuff, there's PropMoto. There's a lot of different publications in that arena, which are interesting. CRE Tech is a event, but they also have content. Another kind of CRE Tech show is called Blueprint, primarily an event, but they also do some content that they publish on a weekly basis. So, there's tons of stuff out there. I think you just need to go through and also I set Google alerts as well for different, you can put in keywords into Google that you just want content back on. So anytime there's, a certain term like PropTech is mentioned, you can get, a summary of articles and links that were based on that, so that we do that as well. And then we put out, and again, this is very specific to our industry, so it may not be interesting to a lot of your listeners, but we put out a weekly newsletter as well, which is simply a summary of kind of interesting articles and content and news that have come out around the world in the last week. And then we just try to summarize that into bite-sized chunks so that people don't have to do a lot of the scouring.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
So I'm reading a book right now called Gert. It's a funny book name. It's about the history of Australia. But it's an accurate history, but told from a very comedic perspective, like to the point where I am like, I was down speaking at South by Southwest in Australia, and they had like a pop-up bookstore within the event. And I was like, I just needed a book for the plane ride home. And the guy recommended it to me. And it took me forever to kind of open it. I'm like, history book, but I started reading it, and I was on the plane the other day, and I was like just laughing in my seat to myself. I was like that guy. So I am definitely going to be gifting that book to a lot of people this year. And I think it's a book that not many people are exposed to. So it's kind of a fun thing.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
I would say for me, it's exercise, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at doing it every day, but the number one thing for me to clear my head is exercise. Like no question. I think especially as we all sit on these things all day long now, getting off the screen, as difficult as that is, I think I know it's a basic answer, but that's what I do to kind of cleanse the brain, if you will.
And give me your number one insight for leveraging technology.
I would say my number one insight would be to do, we talked about this a little bit before, but do the work ahead of time to understand what your business requirements and benefits are before you worry about features and functionality. And don't get caught up in the jargon and the buzz. Like it doesn't, AI's, we're in this massive wave right now, but it needs to make sense for your business. It can't just be, you can't just be AI just because there's an AI sticker on it, so to speak.
All right, you are in the Bay Area. Let's go a different direction. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
I would say one of the many taquerias in the Mission District in San Francisco. There are, along Mission Street or Valencia Street, there are probably 20. So you can't go wrong with any of those.
There you go. Sounds like some great options there. David, really appreciate you joining us today and talking a little bit about kind of your journey into the tech space, specifically how property technology continues to evolve and how we as investors and owners can take advantage of it. And the big takeaway for me is understand what you're solving for. Look at your business, understand where you can drive some efficiencies, whether that is with the resident or the tenant experience, whether that's through your operations, the building management of itself. Find ways to drive efficiencies and then look at technology and see how that technology can be implemented to drive that value. And the thing I love that you and your firm do is it's not just giving someone a diagnosis or a 200-page study to say, hey, here are the best technologies you could be using and walking away, but actually helping some of these companies learn how to implement them, identifying which ones are best for their own situation, and just making sure that we continue to operate with a sense of driving efficiencies, both from a fiscal standpoint, but also from that customer experience. Again, if you want to learn more, you can email David at david@nextrivet.com or go to their website, nextrivet.com. David, thanks again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.